Opening the center sets the stage for rapid piece development and central pawn control. French defense enters. Black prepares to challenge the center by developing a solid pawn structure. Establishing central dominance is key here, aiming for rapid development and piece activity. Challenging the center immediately opens lines for active piece play. Developing a knight here supports the pawn center and prepares for kingside castling, embracing classical principles. Developing the knight to a natural square prepares castling and contests the center's influence. Pinning the knight creates immediate pressure, aiming to disrupt black's pawn structure and development, potentially leading to an isolated d-pawn. Directly pinning the knight opens tactical possibilities and challenges white's central pawn structure. Propelling the pawn forward injects immediate spatial pressure, forcing black's knight to a less active square while preparing further central expansion. Challenging the pinned knight directly creates immediate positional questions, potentially opening the kingside for counterplay or forcing a retreat. Securing the bishop's retreat acknowledges the threat and avoids immediate material loss, simultaneously preparing to develop the queen's side while maintaining a slight space advantage with the advanced e-pawn. Immediately conceding the bishop pair disrupts white's central control and opens the c-file for your rook, a significant positional concession that will need careful management. Opening the b-file offers immediate pressure against black's queenside pawn structure, though it does weaken white's own pawn shield. This creates a strategic imbalance, potentially leading to dynamic play where control of that open file will be paramount for white's attacking chances, while black seeks to exploit the doubled pawns on the c-file as a weakness. Introducing a knight to the center on e4 immediately disrupts white's pawn structure, creating a strong outpost and challenging the bishop on g5. This move forces white to address the immediate tactical threat, potentially leading to a weakened kingside or further concessions. The bold knight repositions, ready to exploit potential weaknesses created by the doubled c-pawns. Unleashing the queen aggressively, white immediately targets the f7 pawn, creating a critical vulnerability around black's monarch that demands precise defensive calculations. Creating a sanctuary for your king on the queenside by advancing the g-pawn is a natural response to white's queenside pawn majority and aggressive queen positioning, but it does weaken your kingside light squares considerably, potentially inviting future attacks along the h4-d8 diagonal or even directly at the king. Recapturing the bishop on c3 opens up the b-file for black's rook and surrenders the crucial d4 square, creating a long-term positional weakness for white that will require careful maneuvering to compensate for. Striking a bold blow, black intercepts the central advance, aiming to disrupt white's pawn structure and gain a tempo by forcing the bishop's retreat. This aggressive fork cleverly targets two valuable pieces simultaneously, creating immediate tactical headaches for white. The subsequent capture promises to unlock black's queenside pawns and open a diagonal for the bishop, injecting dynamism into the early middle game. Solidifying the bishop's post on d3 offers a vital defensive anchor for the king and aims to redeploy the piece towards the kingside attack, potentially supporting a future f4 push. Challenging white's central grip, this pawn push aggressively contests the d4 square, aiming to open lines and create dynamic play, while simultaneously creating a potential outpost for the knight on e4 if white isn't careful with their king's safety. Striking at the heart of black's pawn structure, this capture aggressively contests central space and forces a decision, potentially opening lines for white's queenside majority. The knight embarks on a bold journey towards white's vulnerable kingside, aiming to disrupt white's pawn structure and create tactical opportunities, while ignoring the immediate pawn capture on c5 and prioritizing dynamic piece play over material consolidation. Developing the knight to f3 now offers white a solid outpost for this piece while preparing for kingside castling, a crucial step in consolidating the center and securing the monarch. Unleashing the queen to threaten the a2 pawn injects immediate tactical urgency, forcing white to address this burgeoning threat and disrupting their carefully constructed pawn structure. Securing the monarch behind a rampart of pawns offers immediate safety, a crucial consideration with black's pieces developing aggressively towards the center and the queenside looming. This maneuver disentangles the king from any potential early tactical skirmishes and prepares to bring the rook actively into the game. Seizing the opportunity, black snatches the pawn, but this creates a curious imbalance of material and positional strengths. The queen is now active, yet its position on c5 is potentially precarious, opening up avenues for white's pieces to exert pressure and perhaps initiate a dangerous central thrust. The doubled pawns on the c-file for white, though seemingly a weakness, could ironically contribute to a powerful pawn chain if white can maneuver effectively. Suddenly, white's queen, after a brief detour, re-enters the fray with an aggressive thrust towards the kingside, aiming to disrupt black's developing harmony and potentially exploit the weakened pawn structure around the black monarch that arises from the early pawn advances. The knight retreats to a more defensive posture, safeguarding the f5 square and preparing for potential counterplay along the c-file, while simultaneously shoring up the pawn structure. Threatening mate on g7, this advance aims to exploit black's exposed king and compromised pawn structure, creating immediate pressure that will force concessions. Re-establishing the pawn chain on the kingside after its disruption offers a degree of solidity, though the rook's deployment here feels somewhat tentative, awaiting a clearer purpose as white's queen aggressively targets the king's refuge. Aggressively expanding on the queen side, white signals an intent to seize space and disrupt black's defensive setup, potentially aiming for a queenside majority or even a pawn breakthrough to open lines against the enemy king. Black shores up their central pawn structure after white's aggressive queen maneuver. Developing the bishop to the active edge offers a vital diagonal, subtly challenging black's pawn structure and aiming to exploit the open files that may soon materialize, while simultaneously preparing for future pawn pushes like b4 to gain more breathing room. Introducing an audacious knight fork, black boldly challenges white's centralized queen and threatens to disrupt the elegant pawn structure painstakingly erected. This maneuver injects immediate tactical venom into the position, forcing white to address the looming threat rather than continuing with their queenside expansion. The ensuing complications will test white's ability to defend against this aggressive thrust, while black seeks to capitalize on the disarray. Exploiting the misplaced black knight on e4, this exchange aims to dismantle black's central pawn structure and open lines towards their king. By removing the defender of the d5 square and creating doubled pawns for black on the c-file, white gains a clear advantage in piece activity and pawn majority potential on the queen side, while simultaneously weakening black's king's safety. The pawn's capture on e4 seizes central space, but the unleashed queen on the c-file, now threatening the white king and controlling crucial squares, dramatically escalates the tactical storm brewing on the queen side. Unlocking the knight from its pawn shield, this relocation aims to re-establish central influence and prepare for potential knight outposts, while also subtly defending against any immediate threats to the d-pawn. Unleashing the knight to d5, black shrewdly aims to disrupt white's pawn structure and create attacking possibilities, leveraging the central darkness a knight can exploit. The queen's repositioning to h4 signals an immediate attempt to exploit the exposed white king, now that the black rook on h7 has been moved, and the queen's path to the kingside is partially cleared. This aggressive maneuver aims to create immediate threats, potentially forcing concessions, or even leading to a swift checkmate if black isn't vigilant. The idea is to leverage the queen's attacking power from a more favorable angle, looking for weaknesses in black's pawn structure or undeveloped pieces. White is clearly prioritizing offensive action, hoping to catch black's forces out of position. Black recaptures the pawn, re-establishing material equality, but the long-term consequences of this capture are debatable given the exposed kingside and the advanced central pawns white has cultivated. Finally, white simplifies by exchanging knights, a logical step to reduce black's attacking potential and open lines for white's pieces. The focus now shifts to consolidating the queenside pawn majority and exploiting the weakened dark squares around black's king, particularly if the queen can be dislodged from its active post. Pushing pawns forward with such aggression on the kingside, especially without adequate piece support, dramatically exposes your monarch to incoming threats. The queen retreats, ostensibly to avoid being trapped, but this maneuver abandons the central control white desperately sought. Black's pawn structure is now more dynamic, with the advanced g-pawn threatening further disruption, while white's pieces, particularly the isolated doubled pawns on the c-file, begin to look rather cumbersome. The unleashed knight on d5 is a potent force, eyeing weaknesses and capable of launching a potent kingside assault or probing white's somewhat exposed monarch. Black's bishop now finds an active diagonal, eyeing the potentially exposed white king and preparing to connect the rooks. The knight's leap to d6, unmasking a powerful discovered attack on the black king, forces a swift and potentially disastrous response. This aggressive maneuver immediately seizes control of a key central square, aiming to disrupt black's already precarious pawn structure and expose the monarch to further threats. The forcing nature of this check dictates black's next steps, offering white a chance to exploit the disarray and gain a decisive material or positional advantage. The black king now relocates to d8, a seemingly safe harbor, but this maneuver doesn't erase the significant positional concessions made earlier. White's knight on d6 is a dominant outpost, a constant thorn in black's side, restricting piece mobility and dictating defensive structures. The central pawn majority white possesses offers long-term pressure, and black's inability to achieve harmonious piece development leaves him vulnerable to a slow, positional grind. The forced retreat also signals a loss of initiative and potentially a passive defense from here on out. Striking at the weakened queenside structure, white seeks to capitalize on black's exposed king and disarrayed minor pieces. The king's desperate flight to c8 offers a temporary respite, but the queenside remains deeply compromised, leaving the black monarch a vulnerable target amidst the encroaching white forces. A calculated reinvigoration of the knight's assault, this foray forces the black king back into a compromised central square, while simultaneously setting up a potential discovery threat against the queen. The king's desperate scramble across the board finally brings it to a temporary respite, yet the impending threat of a knight's foray still looms, promising further complications in this keenly contested positional struggle. Dislodging the black king from its sanctuary, this forcing check aims to exploit the awkward placement of black's pieces. The bishop finally finds refuge, but the retreat to c6 comes at a cost of tempo and precious time, while white's pieces are poised to exploit the exposed dark squares around black's king. The bishop's diagonal is now a powerful attacking avenue, threatening the rook and creating a bind. Black's queen re-engages, seeking a central pivot point, but this position is riddled with potential tactical traps stemming from white's activated pieces and the vulnerable king. Unleashing the pawn's power, this advance creates immediate pressure, seeking to disrupt black's developing harmony and potentially open lines towards their still exposed king. A bold attempt to dislodge the aggressive knight and potentially expose the white king, though it relinquishes control of the vital c-file, a crucial artery for a potential counterattack. White proactively seizes the queenside, using the pawn as a spearhead to disrupt black's potential queenside expansion and further restrict the already cramped knight on b6.